Greetings, friends and fellow freelancers. Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop Mercenary. This week, I wanted to touch on something that I honestly thought I had talked about a while ago, because it's such a basic concern of your marketing, particularly when it comes to RPGs, but it seems this is a topic I have neglected until just now. So today, I wanted to talk about identifying your unique selling point and working it into your marketing so that people will actually buy the books you're writing, buy the games you're making, etc., etc. As the name implies, your unique selling point is, well, what makes this game unique? What makes this book unique? What makes this something that is unlike whatever else is out there on the market today? And it's important to remember that just because it says unique, that doesn't mean it has to be groundbreaking. It doesn't have to be amazing, astonishing. It doesn't have to be something no one's ever seen before. It just has to be something that makes people stop and go, that does sound interesting. And more importantly, it should be something that you can identify quickly and that you can explain in a relatively short period of time. For folks who have either read my blog, The Literary Mercenary, or if you've stopped in on other videos on this channel, you may have heard me mention the elevator pitch. This is essentially something that writers are told to have on hand for either when someone comes and asks them, hey, what's your book about? Or it's where the name comes from. If you are trapped in an elevator with a literary agent and they're getting off in a couple of floors, what do you say to get them interested in your book? What is going to make you sum up your entire work in less than a minute so that they will stop and go, yeah, I want that book. Do you have representation? That's essentially what you need to do with your game. It's what you need to do with any novels you're writing. It's what you need to do with all your creative projects, because while we might be able to wax poetic for hours about this thing we've spent so much time and energy and effort creating, other people are not always willing to take the long way around. They don't want the scenic route. They want you to get to the point of what is it about this thing that should interest them? Why should they care? So take a moment, look over what you're making and ask, well, what is it about this game that is unique, that is different, that is interesting in ways that, well, other games might not be? And it can be subtle, it can be very obvious. As an example, if someone were to ask me, hey, why should I check out Sundara? For folks who have not checked out Sundara, Dawn of a New Age, that is my fantasy RPG setting. I've done countless videos for it on the channel if you're interested in more beyond this unique sales pitch. But what I am essentially trying to create with Sundara is, it is a high fantasy setting that has as much inclusivity of ideas and weirdness and creativity as possible, that does not have an alignment system, which is important given that it's written for Pathfinder Classic and Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But even more importantly, in my opinion, it is a forward-looking, problem-oriented setting. It is a setting where we are not trying to look back at some ancient lost golden age to reclaim where we were. It's not a post-apocalyptic setting where you get with things like Middle-earth and similar settings that have taken inspiration from that. It is a world that is moving forward. It is a world where all options should be on the table and should be considered viable when it comes to trying to solve problems. And sometimes that's enough to get people's attention. Other times, well, I need to inform them I have an entire city full of strange inventors and bizarre alchemists. There's another one ruled by 5 dragons that has its own air force. You gotta figure out what it is people want to hear, which is another lesson worth considering of figure out a couple of different unique selling points and base them on your audience. As an example, take a moment, step back. Let's say we were talking about getting people at your table to play a new game that they were not familiar with, rather than you trying to sell your game to somebody. It's the same basic idea. You want to get people interested enough to try it. And you have a couple friends around the table. And you know that one of them, they're really not big on fantasy RPGs. They much prefer modern games, they prefer sci-fi games. How do you get them interested in a fantasy game? Well, you figure out what it is that they like, because, hey, your friend might really not want to, go full Game of Thrones on something, but what if you inform him there's an entire part of this setting that is built on top of a crashed spaceship and is trying to reverse engineer all of this super sci-fi tech, and so you can have people with ray guns, with, laser swords and whatnot, running around in this otherwise medieval fantasy setting, just trying to recapture the future that's been lost. maybe that will get them interested. And for folks who are curious, it's not an example I pulled out of nowhere. That's actually something that happens in Galarian, which is the core setting for Pathfinder. If you didn't know that, go check it out. It's a lot of fun. And sometimes your unique selling point really is just an aesthetic. A good example for that might be Army Men. For folks who haven't played it, you are, well, a squad of living plastic people in a living plastic world, and you are all assigned to one of the various settings militaries, and you are sent on missions by your game master. A unique selling point for that game might be like you're tired of playing in games where you have to constantly come up with all this motivation and where people are always trying to refuse plot hooks and it feels like it takes forever to get a game going. Well, if you're all enlisted, your CO tells you, hey, this is your job, go do it. There is no whining, there is no complaining, there is no, well, my character's not interested in this. It doesn't matter. That's your job. You are soldiers, you have been told what to do, go do it. Another unique selling point for it might be like the sheer wonky aesthetic of folks who enjoy the idea of they want to play a squad-based game where they're all plastic soldiers. That's really interesting, especially when you consider that they're also fighting giant insects, weird robots, strange aliens, perhaps. Anything you could find like on sale at the dollar store in the toy aisle, you can just plop it down right on the mat. Don't have to paint it, don't have to do anything. That's exactly what you're seeing. It is lore and game accurate. That might do it for some folks. Other folks might really like D&D 5e, but they're mad that it has such a lack of tactical options. Well, I invented a whole bunch of them for Army Men, so that is another way that you could get someone on board of, hey, it's that game that you kind of like but wish had these options with the options you want added in. The thing with unique selling points is that while you might have some that you're pretty sure will appeal broadly to people, you're also going to have to figure out what it is your specific audience wants. And this is where things can get a little dicey and require a little bit of, well, trial and error. Because in your marketing, it's important to highlight what you think is a unique selling point, but sometimes you can sort of bury the lead or miss the forest for the trees. I've given some examples of my own games. I wish to give an example from someone that I worked for a while back. Names will not be mentioned, and the specific product will not be mentioned because I did not clear this with them ahead of time, so I don't know whether they would appreciate the plug. However, long ago, I had a job where I was freelance helping someone edit their fantasy setting. And it was a sci-fantasy setting. It was meant to include all sorts of weird tropes and strange creatures, and it was meant to be really engaging, really interesting. The issue I kept running into is it would get bogged down in the weeds of you would have, there's this many men-at-arms in this location, or there's this many cavalry that you'll find in this settlement. And no one really cared about that. That would have been very important to know for like a minis game or for just giving stats on a location for something like that. But when it came to an RPG setting, numbers like that were really just a waste of page space because nobody is going to care. The storyteller's not going to care, the players are not going to care because that's not going to affect them in a meaningful way. At the same time, lots of these places started feeling very samey. And I got to a location where it was literally, there are skyships constantly being raided by Vikings riding ice dragons. And I had a full stop moment where I sent the client an email and I said, why is this not on the cover of your book? Why is this specific incident the most entertaining and interesting thing I have come across in dozens and dozens of pages, not the first thing you lead with when people ask, like, well, what kind of fantasy is this? Don't bury your lead. Don't keep the really fun stuff, behind the paywall so that people have to buy your book and get to page 372 before they find all the really weird, wonky fun stuff. Figure out what it is that's going to really appeal to people. Figure out what it is that people seem to really fixate on when you talk about your game or you talk about your book. And then let people know, hey, I have that in here. You should come check it out. Because people love novelty. They love things that are new and different and unique. And that is something you really need to seize on, especially if you're trying to compete in a very saturated market. So it's worth taking a moment, sitting down, looking at the thing that you're making, and asking yourself, okay, if I wanted to try and get your average random gamer to check this out, what would I tell them? And it's typically what is unique about the setting, what is unique about the mechanics, or what is unique about what you can do as a player. Because if you can narrow it down to one of those three things, you will have a pitch for people. And sometimes having a pitch is really all it takes. Of maybe like the first person will think that's really cool. The next person really won't care. The third person will ask you to hold that thought, go get their game table, bring it back, and then ask you to start telling them all about it because they want to get everybody else interested in this too. And before I close out, that is probably the most important thing to remember of when it comes to marketing, when it comes to gaming, there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that's going to work. A unique selling point or a list of unique selling points is very good to have. It's a thing you should be able to do, especially just on command, pull it out of your pocket. Because if you're at a convention, if you're at a gaming store and you're doing a selling event, if you're online and someone's asking you, like, hey, I saw you're advertising your game, like, what do you think is the most unique thing about it? You need to be able to just tell people rapidly, right away. Just launch into your sales pitch and keep it short and clean. However, it's not going to work for everybody. Yeah, it is a broad blanket, but it's not going to cover every possible interest. And certain people are just not going to be interested in whatever, like, you think the unique selling point is. There might be players out there who, like, when I tell them, hey, Army Men, like, puts you as part of an official military, they're really not down for that. They, even if they haven't played the game, even if they don't have any bad experiences, they don't like the idea of being just under someone's control like that. They want to have more freedom for their character. Fair point. That's all right. But if that's the case, this game is not going to be for them. If I explain all the things in Sundara that I changed or altered to make it more unique, they might not be interested in that. They might really like the alignment system. They want a world that has those definite things where, like, the divine and the mortal have rules and limitations and sureties. If that's the case, then Sundara is not going to be, like, a setting they enjoy playing in, and so on and so forth. So remember that you cannot please everybody. It does not matter how much thought you put into it, how unique you think your game, your story, whatever it is. There's always going to be people who are just not for you. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't come up with some way to try and reach as many people as possible. And that's why you need to know what your unique selling point is and make sure that you hammer it whenever folks ask, because sometimes that's all it takes to get people's eyes to light up, and you can just see the thought broadcast across their face of, I need to check that out immediately. But that is all for this week's edition of Tabletop Mercenary. As always, if you have particular topics you'd like to see me discuss, put it down in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all those important things. Because unfortunately, YouTube has altered the algorithm again, and it's making it really hard for any of us to get our videos seen and anyone to actually show up and check things out. So I appreciate you making it all the way to the end, and I would love your help getting this into the hands of folks out there who maybe they have a good game, maybe they have a good book, but they really haven't figured out how to explain to other people what's unique about it yet. So, until next time, this is Tabletop Mercenary, signing off. First and foremost, thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Tabletop Mercenary. If there's a question you have about being an RPG creator, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments below so I can address it in a future episode. If you want to help me keep the lights on and keep this show going, then please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and giving it a share on your own social media pages to help boost the signal. Lastly, if you really enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a tip by buying me a Ko-fi or becoming a Patreon patron at the links in the video description below. You'll find me on both sites under the name The Literary Mercenary.